Salt Lake City, 2:59 a.m. A young college student steps out of a lift into a dark park. No streetlights. No witnesses. No cameras watching. She walks toward a waiting car. Within hours, she will vanish. And within days, detectives will uncover one of the most disturbing crimes Utah has ever seen. Her name was McKenzie Lueck. She was 23 years old, a college student at the University of Utah. Bright, social, ambitious. The kind of person whose life seemed to be just beginning. But in the early hours of June 17, 2019, something happened between the airport and that empty park. Something that would lead investigators to a backyard fire and a shallow grave in the mountains. This is the story of how a routine airport pickup turned into a murder investigation. 2 days earlier, McKenzie had flown to California. Her grandmother had died. The funeral was emotional, heavy, quiet. Family gathered. Stories were shared. And then, as life always does, everything moved forward again. On the night of June 16th, McKenzie boarded a late flight back to Utah. She had classes coming up, work shifts to cover, friends to see. Just another normal return trip after a difficult weekend. Her flight landed at Salt Lake City International Airport shortly after 1:30 a.m. She texted her mother, "I landed." A short message. Simple routine. It would be the last time her family ever heard from her. Airport security cameras captured her walking through the terminal. She looked calm. Tired, maybe. But nothing seemed unusual. She collected her luggage. Then she opened her phone and requested a ride. A Lyft driver accepted the trip. The destination entered into the app was unusual. Not her apartment. Not a friend's house. The ride was set for Hatch Park, a quiet residential park in North Salt Lake. Still, rideshare drivers see strange requests all the time. The driver arrived and McKenzie got into the car. The ride began at 2:40 a.m. It lasted about 20 minutes. During the drive, nothing seemed alarming. She sat quietly in the back seat, scrolling through her phone, occasionally sending messages. Outside the window, the city slowly disappeared. Streetlights became sparse. Traffic vanished. Neighborhoods turned dark and silent. Then the car pulled into Hatch Park. Time, 2:59 a.m. The Lyft driver stopped near the entrance. McKenzie stepped out. What happened next would become the last confirmed sighting of her alive. The driver later described what he saw. Another car was already parked nearby, waiting. McKenzie walked directly toward it. No hesitation. No confusion. She opened the passenger door and got inside. The vehicle pulled away. The Lyft driver drove off. At that moment, nothing about the situation seemed dangerous. But detectives would later realize that ride had delivered McKenzie directly to the person who would kill her. Morning came. Salt Lake City woke up. Traffic filled the streets. Students walked to campus. But McKenzie never showed up anywhere. She missed classes. She missed work. Her phone stopped responding. At first, no one panicked. Friends assumed she was resting after the late flight. But as the hours passed, something felt wrong. McKenzie was known for staying in contact. She texted constantly. She answered calls. She updated friends about everything. Now, silence. Her roommates noticed something strange. Her car was still parked at the apartment, exactly where she had left it before the trip. Her luggage from California never appeared. Her phone went straight to voicemail. By the next day, concern began spreading through her circle of friends. Messages flooded her phone. Calls went unanswered. Social media activity stopped completely. And then her father made the call that would officially start the investigation. June 20th. 3 days after the airport ride, McKenzie's father contacted police and requested a welfare check. Officers visited her apartment. Inside, everything looked normal. Her belongings were untouched. Her car was still outside, but McKenzie herself was gone. The moment investigators learned about the Lyft ride, the case shifted instantly. Digital records gave them a starting point. The ride had a timestamp, a pickup location, and a destination: Hatch Park. Detectives began building the timeline. 1:35 a.m. Flight lands. 2:40 a.m. Lyft ride begins. 2:59 a.m. Drop off at Hatch Park. After that, nothing. No phone activity. No bank transactions. No camera footage. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. But the drop-off location created a new question. Why would someone returning from the airport in the middle of the night go to an empty park? Investigators believed the answer was simple. She wasn't meeting a stranger. She was meeting someone she expected to see. McKenzie had arranged to meet someone before the flight landed. Someone who didn't want their home address recorded in a rideshare app. Someone who chose a quiet location where cameras were scarce. Someone who picked her up in the dark. If that theory was correct, the key to the entire case would be identifying the driver of that second car. And that meant digging into McKenzie's phone. Her messages. Her apps. Her online conversations. Everything. Because somewhere in those digital records was the person who met her in the park. And once investigators found that person, the investigation would take a shocking turn. One that would lead them to a suburban home, a backyard burn site, and a man who had been hiding in plain sight. 3 days. That's how long it took before the silence became a full investigation. When McKenzie Lueck didn't respond to friends, missed work, and failed to appear at school, detectives realized something wasn't right. By June 20th, the missing person case had already begun. And investigators had one advantage: a digital trail. Because in 2019, almost every movement a person makes leaves data behind. Rides, messages, location pings, online activity. And McKenzie's last known movements were already documented. Detectives began with the Lyft driver. He confirmed the timeline. Airport pickup at 2:40 a.m. Drop off at Hatch Park at 2:59 a.m. Nothing unusual during the ride. But one detail stood out. McKenzie had clearly been expecting someone. She walked directly to another car already parked nearby. She opened the door and got in. No hesitation. That meant she knew the driver, or at least believed she did. The next step was obvious. Investigators needed to know who she planned to meet. Police obtained a search warrant for McKenzie's phone records, text messages, call logs, social media, messaging apps, everything. They started building a communication map. Who she talked to, who she messaged frequently, who she contacted in the hours before her flight landed. Then something appeared. A conversation that immediately caught detectives' attention. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. But the timing was critical. Just hours before the flight landed, McKenzie had exchanged messages with someone she had never met in person. A man she connected with online. The meeting at Hatch Park had been arranged through that conversation. The park was chosen deliberately. Neutral ground. Quiet. Private. No cameras on nearby houses. a location where two strangers could meet without leaving much evidence behind. Investigators now had a possible suspect, but they still needed proof. They needed to know if that person had actually been at the park, and more importantly, where he went afterward. While digital analysts reviewed the messages, detectives examined something else: location data. Phones constantly communicate with nearby cell towers. Those signals create location records. Not perfect GPS coordinates, but enough to place someone within a certain area. Investigators began comparing McKenzie's phone data with the number she had been messaging. If both phones appeared near Hatch Park at the same time, they would have their first real lead. Hours later, the data came back, and the results changed everything. Both phones had connected to the same cell tower sector covering Hatch Park shortly before 3 a.m. For detectives, that was significant. It meant the two phones had likely been in the same area at the same time, exactly when the Lyft driver dropped McKenzie off. That information gave investigators something they desperately needed: a name. The phone number was registered to a man living in Salt Lake City. His name, Ayoola Ajayi. Age 31. At first glance, nothing about him screamed danger. He worked in tech, lives in a suburban neighborhood, appeared quiet and reserved. But detectives had learned long ago, first impressions rarely tell the full story. Investigators began building a background profile. Ajayi had once worked as an IT technician. He had attended college, and he had recently moved into a house in Salt Lake City's Fair Park neighborhood. But as detectives dug deeper, another detail surfaced. Something troubling. Something that made the investigation more urgent. Ajayi had a criminal history. Years earlier, he had been arrested in connection with an assault. It wasn't murder, but it was violent. And suddenly, the possibility that McKenzie had entered his car at Hatch Park became far more concerning. Detectives decided to move quickly. Before confronting Ajayi, they needed to confirm he had been in the area. And that meant checking surveillance cameras. Even quiet neighborhoods have cameras now. Traffic intersections, gas stations, security systems in homes. Investigators began collecting footage from streets surrounding Hatch Park. The search stretched across dozens of cameras. Hours of video, frame by frame, car by car. Then, finally, they saw it. What the video shows: a vehicle leaving the Hatch Park area shortly after 3 a.m. The car matched the type registered to Ajayi. The direction it traveled pointed toward Salt Lake City, toward Ajayi's neighborhood. If McKenzie had entered that car, this was likely the route they took. But detectives still needed more proof, because at that moment, McKenzie was still classified as missing. Not murdered, not abducted, just missing. And confronting a suspect without solid evidence could destroy the investigation. So detectives kept digging. They examined more camera footage, more traffic cameras, more residential security systems. Then another video appeared. This one captured something chilling. Ajayi's car pulled into his neighborhood early that morning. Timestamp, around 3:30 a.m. Exactly when investigators believed he would have arrived home after leaving Hatch Park. But one question still hung over the investigation. Did McKenzie enter that house? Or did something happen before they even got there? Meanwhile, McKenzie's family was living through every parent's nightmare. Days passed. No messages. No calls. No sightings. Her father flew to Utah to help with the search. Friends organized volunteer groups. Flyers appeared across Salt Lake City. Her photo spread through social media. The hope was simple. Someone had seen something. Someone had heard something. Someone knew where McKenzie was, but investigators were beginning to fear something far worse. Because the deeper they looked into Ajayi's digital activity, the more disturbing the picture became. And soon, a search of his home would reveal evidence that turned a missing person case into a homicide investigation. By the fourth day of the investigation, detectives were no longer treating the case as a simple disappearance. Too many things didn't add up. A late-night meeting in a dark park. A man investigators had never heard of. A car leaving the area minutes after McKenzie disappeared. And then, silence. No phone activity. No bank transactions. No contact with friends or family. To experienced investigators, that pattern often meant one thing. The victim was no longer alive. Now detectives needed proof. And that meant getting inside Ayoola Ajayi's house. But before they could search the property, they needed something stronger than suspicion. They needed probable cause. So investigators kept building their timeline. They pulled more surveillance footage from the streets surrounding Ajayi's neighborhood. More traffic cameras. More residential doorbell systems. More parking lot cameras. They weren't just looking for Ajayi's car anymore. They were looking for McKenzie. Even a single glimpse could confirm she had made it to the house. Hours of footage passed under scrutiny. Frame by frame. Street by street. Then investigators spotted something. Not McKenzie, but something that raised serious questions. What the video shows. Later that same day, surveillance cameras captured Ajayi leaving his house carrying large bags. Multiple trips. Several heavy-looking trash bags. The footage showed him loading them into his car, then driving away. That alone wasn't a crime. People throw away trash every day. But detectives weren't looking at the bags. They were looking at the timing. Because only hours earlier, McKenzie had disappeared. Investigators followed the route of Ajayi's vehicle through traffic cameras. Eventually, the car arrived at a familiar place. A local park dumpster. Cameras recorded Ajayi throwing the bags away, then driving off. Detectives knew what they had to do next. They secured the dumpster and called in forensic teams. Inside the trash bags, investigators discovered something disturbing. Clothing. Personal items. Objects that appeared to belong to a woman. Some of the items were burned. Others were damaged. Forensic technicians carefully documented every piece. Photographed everything. They collected everything. Because if any of those items belonged to McKenzie, the case would immediately change. Evidence was rushed to the lab, and detectives continued building their case. While forensic teams processed the dumpster evidence, investigators turned their attention back to Ajayi. They began digging deeper into his background, his online activity, his recent purchases. And that search uncovered another disturbing detail. Just days before McKenzie disappeared, Ajayi had made a purchase. A large amount of gasoline. Gasoline purchased in portable containers. For detectives, that raised a chilling possibility. Because gasoline is often used for one purpose: destroying evidence. After bringing McKenzie to his home, Ajayi killed her. Then attempted to eliminate evidence by burning her belongings. Possibly even burning her body. If that theory was correct, investigators needed to find the burn site. And they didn't have to look far. Because Ajayi's property had something unusual in the backyard. A recently constructed fire pit. When detectives visited the neighborhood, several residents remembered something strange. A fire. Late at night. Large. And unusually intense. Neighbors recalled seeing flames rising high above the fence line. Some said it burned for hours. Others said the smell was strange. not like a normal backyard fire. That information pushed investigators to act quickly. Because if evidence had been burned there, time was critical. Ash can disappear quickly. Rain, wind, animals. Every hour mattered. Police obtained a search warrant. On June 27th, detectives arrived at Ajayi's home. The moment they entered the backyard, they saw it. The fire pit. Fresh ash. Burned debris. Investigators immediately secured the area. Forensic teams began carefully sifting through the remains. They used small tools. Screens. Evidence bags. Every grain of ash had to be examined. Because sometimes the smallest fragment can tell the entire story. Within hours, the discovery came. Bone fragments. Small. Burned. But unmistakably human. The missing person investigation had just become a homicide case. Forensic anthropologists were called to the scene. They began analyzing the remains. The fragments were badly damaged by heat. But investigators were able to recover several pieces. Enough for laboratory testing. Meanwhile, detectives intensified their focus on Ajayi. But there was a problem. He was gone. His house was empty. His phone was turned off. And suddenly, the prime suspect in McKenzie Lueck's disappearance had vanished. Detectives feared Ajayi might be trying to flee. Airports were alerted. State patrol officers were notified. Investigators began searching for his vehicle. Because if Ajayi was running, time was running out. While officers searched for the suspect, forensic teams made another discovery in the backyard ash. Personal items. Melted metal. Fabric remnants. Objects consistent with clothing. Investigators believed the fire pit had been used to destroy evidence connected to Mackenzie's disappearance. But one major question remained. If Ajayi had burned her body in the backyard, where were the rest of the remains? Because the fragments recovered so far were far too small to represent an entire body. Which meant one thing. The crime scene didn't end in the backyard. It went somewhere else. Somewhere detectives hadn't found yet. And as investigators expanded their search beyond the city, they would uncover a second location. A remote canyon. A freshly dug grave. And the final piece of the horrifying truth about what happened after Mackenzie stepped into that waiting car at Hatch Park. The burned fragments in the fire pit told detectives one thing. This crime had been deliberate. Carefully planned. But the backyard fire pit also told them something else. It wasn't the final location. Because the amount of remains recovered there was far too small. Which meant the rest of McKenzie Lueck's body had been taken somewhere else. And investigators believed they already knew who took it. Ayoola Ajayi. Now they just had to find where he went. Detectives returned to the digital evidence. Phones. Location pings. Vehicle movement. Everything that could track Ajayi's movements in the hours after the fire. Because, while criminals often try to erase physical evidence, digital evidence is much harder to destroy. And Ajayi had made a mistake. His phone had been active. Cell phone records showed Ajayi traveling outside Salt Lake City shortly after the fire in his backyard. The signal moved east, toward the Wasatch Mountains, toward an area filled with canyons and hiking trails. To investigators, that location made sense. Remote. Quiet. Miles of wilderness. A place where someone could bury something and never be seen. Detectives pulled traffic camera footage from roads leaving the city. The same vehicle appeared again. Ajayi's car. Heading into the canyon. Timestamp. Late evening. That narrowed the search area. But it was still enormous. Hundreds of acres of forest and mountain terrain. Searching randomly would take weeks, maybe months. But detectives had another clue. Something Ajayi had done earlier. Something that seemed insignificant at first. But now it matters a lot. Just days before McKenzie disappeared, Ajayi had purchased a shovel. The purchase had been made using his credit card. That meant the receipt existed. And the timing matched the crime. For detectives, the shovel purchase suggested something chilling. Ajayi hadn't just planned the meeting. He had planned what came after. After killing McKenzie and burning evidence in the backyard fire pit, Ajayi transported her body into the canyon and buried it. If that was true, somewhere out there was a grave. And detectives were determined to find it. Search teams were assembled. Investigators. K-9 units. Forensic specialists. Drones. They began combing through the canyon area identified by cell phone records. The terrain was difficult. Rocky. Steep. Covered in dense brush. But trained search dogs have one powerful advantage. They can smell decomposition even when it's buried underground. The dogs moved slowly through the forest. Handlers watching every reaction. Every pause. Every change in behavior. Hours passed. Nothing. Then one of the dogs stopped and refused to move. Investigators began digging in the area where the K-9 alerted. The soil looked disturbed. Recently turned. Loose compared to the surrounding ground. Exactly the kind of earth a shovel would leave behind. Within minutes, the search team uncovered something. Fabric. Then more. Then the unmistakable outline of a human body. The remains were carefully excavated. And the worst fear of McKenzie's family became reality. The body buried in the canyon was McKenzie Lueck. She had been missing for more than a week. Now detectives knew the truth. This had never been a disappearance. It had been a murder. The remains were transported to the medical examiner's office. Autopsy results would later confirm the cause of death. But investigators didn't need the report to know who was responsible. They already had a suspect. A suspect whose house contained burned human remains. A suspect whose phone traveled to the burial site. A suspect whose car had been seen leaving Hatch Park minutes after McKenzie got inside. Now the only question left was simple. Where was Ayoola Ajayi? The search for him intensified. Detectives contacted his friends, co-workers, neighbors. But no one had seen him since the search of his house began. His phone remained off. His car wasn't at his home. And for a brief moment, investigators feared he had already escaped. Then the case took another turn. On June 28, 2019, Ajayi resurfaced. But not in another state. Not in another country. He was still in Salt Lake City. Police located him during a traffic stop. Officers immediately took him into custody. The man investigators believed murdered McKenzie Lueck was finally under arrest. The charges were severe. Aggravated murder. Aggravated kidnapping. Obstruction of justice. Desecration of a human body. The evidence against him was overwhelming. But the biggest question still remained unanswered. Why? Why did McKenzie agree to meet him? What happened inside that house? And what drove Ajayi to commit such a brutal crime? As detectives began preparing their case, they uncovered disturbing details about Ajayi's past. Details that painted a darker picture of the man behind the crime. A history of violence. A hidden life. And secrets that would soon emerge in court. But the most chilling revelation was yet to come, because investigators were about to discover that McKenzie might not have been his first planned victim. When police finally arrested Ayoola Ajayi, the case against him already looked overwhelming. Surveillance footage, cell phone location data, burned human remains in his backyard, McKenzie Lueck's body buried in the canyon. But for prosecutors, solving the case wasn't enough. They had to prove motive. They had to explain why. And the deeper investigators dug into Ajayi's life, the more disturbing the picture became. On the outside, Ajayi appeared ordinary. A former IT worker. A man who had once attended Utah State University. Someone who had even briefly worked in tech and banking environments. Neighbors described him as quiet, reserved. The kind of person who kept to himself. Nothing about him screamed violent killers. But appearances can hide a lot. And investigators soon discovered Ajayi had been living two completely different lives. Digital forensic teams began analyzing Ajayi's computers, hard drives, and online accounts. What they found revealed a secret world. Ajayi had been active on multiple online platforms where people arranged anonymous meetups and fetish encounters. These weren't casual dating sites. They were niche communities. Communities where users sometimes discussed dangerous fantasies. Control. Restraint. Violence. For investigators, the discovery raised serious concerns about whether McKenzie had unknowingly walked into something far more dangerous than a simple meetup. But the digital evidence didn't stop there. Investigators also found something else. Photographs. And disturbing online posts. Some of them described violent scenarios in graphic detail. Scenarios involving kidnapping and harm. None of those posts proved a crime. But when combined with everything else, they suggested something terrifying. This might not have been spontaneous. It might have been planned. Ajayi lured McKenzie to Hatch Park using social media. Once she arrived, he drove her to his house. Inside that house, he restrained her. And at some point during that encounter, he killed her. The exact sequence of events inside the home was never fully confirmed. But the physical evidence left little doubt about the outcome. During the search of Ajayi's home, investigators discovered restraints and other items consistent with bondage. Some of the items were found in the same property where the fire pit was located. For prosecutors, those discoveries helped support the theory that the crime involved kidnapping and captivity before the murder. But there was another piece of evidence that made the case even stronger. Something digital. Something Ajayi didn't realize investigators would find. Security footage from Ajayi's own neighborhood captured his car arriving at the house shortly after picking McKenzie up from Hatch Park. The car pulled into the driveway. McKenzie never appeared leaving the house afterward. Hours later, the same cameras captured Ajayi moving around the property repeatedly, carrying items, lighting the backyard fire pit, and later leaving the home with bags. The timeline now looked clear. 2 a.m., McKenzie arrives at Hatch Park. Minutes later, she enters Ajayi's car. Soon after, the car reaches Ajayi's home. After that, the fire pit burns late into the night. Later, Ajayi drives into the canyon. Later still, McKenzie's body is buried. Every piece of evidence pointed in the same direction. And prosecutors were preparing to present it all in court. But before the trial could begin, Ajayi made a decision. One that would change the course of the case. In October 2020, more than a year after McKenzie's murder, Ajayi appeared in court. Instead of fighting the charges at trial, he pleaded guilty. Guilty to aggravated murder. Guilty to aggravated kidnapping. And guilty to the additional charges tied to the destruction of evidence. For McKenzie's family, the plea brought mixed emotions. There would be no long trial, no drawn-out courtroom battle. But it also meant they might never learn every detail of what happened inside that house. McKenzie's family described her as vibrant, compassionate, and full of life. She loved traveling. She loved learning. And she had been working hard to build her future. Her family had spent days hoping she would be found alive. Instead, they were left grieving a loss that never should have happened. The judge sentenced Ajayi to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The harshest sentence available, short of the death penalty. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars. But for many people following the case, one question still lingers. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Because McKenzie did something millions of people do every day. She agreed to meet someone she had met online. A decision that seemed routine. A decision that ended in one of the most disturbing crimes Salt Lake City had seen in years. The story of McKenzie Lueck is a reminder of how quickly ordinary moments can turn into tragedy. A late-night flight home. A short rideshare to a quiet park. A meeting that was supposed to last minutes. And a stranger waiting in the darkness. What happened after McKenzie stepped into that car shocked an entire city. And exposed the hidden danger of someone living a double life just a few streets away. But the most haunting part of the case is this. McKenzie's final moments began in a public park. A place surrounded by houses, streetlights, and passing cars. Yet no one knew what was about to unfold. And by the time anyone realized she was missing, it was already too late. Thank you for watching this episode of Silent Evidence, True Crime Exposed. If you found this story compelling, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Join us next time as we explore another chilling true crime case. Stay safe and take care.